Hey YouTube, how's it going? Kevin Cleary here with a knife video for you, and today we have the very cool Olamic Tactical Swift. Now this is a knife that I had been waiting for quite some time. I think pictures of this began to sort of circulate early 2016, maybe even late 2015. I know it was a while that I was looking at pictures and even seeing some early prototypes and stuff on Instagram before they finally became available. Anyway, when Eugene finally did make the announcement on his Instagram that, hey, if you want one of these, I can have it ready by Blade Show, which was of course a few months ago now, I was like, yep, I'm on it. And I sent him an email, or actually sent him a DM and discussed how I wanted to finish it. And so that's the other thing about this. This finish is my own specification. And it actually, you can see there is some similarity to a Curtis there. And that's because I sent him a picture of a Curtis and said, hey, can you do something like this? Now, I want to point out that there are tons of variations available. Before we get into the rest, you may look at this and go, yeah, I like the shape, but I think I would do something different. Well, there are tons and tons of options. So you can either, go to whatever your favorite retailer is, Blade HQ or Knife Center or wherever else. A lot of people have these in stock and pick one out. Or you can specifically contact Olamic and have them put one together for you the way I did. So lots of options here and pretty much something that's going to make everyone happy. Let's go ahead with the specs, but let me point out that the weight is for the full titanium slabs. There are a few versions out there that have holes or an acid rain pattern, and they're going to be a bit lighter because some material is removed. So size and weight on this guy, 8 and 5/8 inches overall. 3 3/4 inches on the blade, and so it's a pretty small package, and it's a fairly long blade. So you guys know I really like that when I get a lot of cutting edge in a fairly comfortable, easy to carry package. And the handle is 4 7/8 inches overall. So that's the closed length there. All right, 4 7/8. It's actually just under 1/2 inch thick, so very nice and slim, very easy to have in your pocket. And not overly heavy at 4.72 ounces. Now again, you could get a lighter version if you went with one that was, drilled out in some way. It would be interesting to see, and maybe Eugene, if you're watching this, it would be cool to see you do some internal milling. So the knife on the outside would look the same, but there would be some pockets into the titanium on the inside to cut down that weight just a little bit. Let's go ahead and talk then. Oh yeah, by the way, I should point out how it carries. I always do that. So yeah, for a nearly 5-ounce knife, this actually feels very light in hand, and it's really, really comfortable in pocket. I carry this quite a bit. As you can well imagine, it's a pretty comfortable knife to carry with you. And because of that, it gets carried on a lot of days where, I want to carry something nice, but something like my Curtis or even a Hinderer would be a little onerous. I will carry this guy with me because it's very comfortable to have in pocket. I won't make too many comments now about the pocket clip, but we will come back and talk about that shortly. For now, let's take a look at this blade. There we go. So this is Elmax steel. You can see the satin finish. I think in fact, I know there are different finishes available. So if you're not a big fan of satin, I definitely am. I really, really like a satin finished blade. I just love the look of the grind lines. I love the fact that if I were to put a little scratch on this, I can kind of rub it out with just some steel wool or something, where on a DLC coated blade, or even an acid wash blade, every little nook and scratch and mark tends to stand out a little more. So for me, a satin blade is also a little more usable. All right, it's not a super highly mirrored satin. You can see a little bit of reflection there, but not to the extent of, say, the W604 that we looked at the other week. Nice big fuller here, sort of a modified drop point Wharncliffe. There is almost a bit of a transition here, so it's almost more of a Wharncliffe style blade, or even a clip point blade. Fairly thin behind the edge, 27 thousandths. The blade stock itself is 138 thousandths, so pretty slim blade stock. This is not, this crazy overbuilt type of stuff that we often see today. So this is just a really nice, comfortable carry knife. Great utility tool. The cutting edge, as I said, is quite thin. It's a flat grind, so slicing works really well. And since there's always talk about stuff getting in the fuller, I went a full week. Every night when I was making meals, I would cut up all the vegetables and meat and whatever else I was cutting with this knife just to see if I would have problems with stuff getting in the fuller, and it was totally fine. Even with, you know, softer things like potato or meat that's got like fat in it and stuff, I just had no problems with stuff getting in the fuller. The other thing about that is, I suppose if it did happen, because this fuller is open at the end, by the way, as a design choice, I love that. Gives that really cool profile here at the tip. You could just easily wipe it out and everything would come out the end, but I just didn't have it as a problem at all. So I never even really needed to wipe the knife any more than I would, you know, of course, if I cut through a bunch of stuff, I'm going to wipe my blade off before I close it. But I didn't have to go to any extra effort to get anything out of that fuller. So not too much to complain about there. And as a design choice, I do like the fuller. And since we're kind of done with the blade at this point, I will say this, the fuller also works really nicely to open the blade, either by a spidey flick or just sort of do a nice gentle thumb roll open. So let's go ahead now and talk about lockup and deployment. You know, to no one's surprise, this is a pretty smooth knife. Whoops. There you go. You can see it's drop shut. Very, very smooth feeling, very, very clean, really nice. Just a, I don't know, just a refined feel on the lockup and deployment here. If you take a look inside, you can see that it is an, hold on. There you go. You can see the stop pin moving in there. So this is a pretty common way of doing an internal stop pin. The stop pin rides in the blade, and there's a groove that you can see right there. Hold on. There you go. There's a groove you can see there, and the stop pin rides in that groove, and that's what stops the knife when it's closed and open. Pretty nice way of doing a stop pin because it doesn't interfere with the design in any way. It allows you a lot of freedom. The Liangma Remedy was done this way. The Riot, I'll show you here. You can probably see it a little better on the Epoch. So you can see the stop pin there. The black on silver really stands out. And so it's a similar design to this, except it's closed, okay? So there's no opening here where you can actually see that stop pin easily. You sort of have to angle it and look in. There you go. All right, so the stop pin is internal and it rides in sort of a track there. It is a ball bearing pivot, ceramic ball bearing pivot with a ceramic detent. And the action on this guy is really nice. The detent isn't crazy strong, and it will either light switch or push button. Although to push button this knife, you're kind of pushing right down on the sharpest point of the flipper, and generally that makes me want to light switch it because it's just a little more comfortable. Of course, whoops. Of course, doing a spidey flick works really well also. Lockup is nice and solid, no blade play in any direction. Of course, there is a stainless steel lock bar insert and an over travel stop, which you can see right there where that piece of steel extends there behind the rest of the frame. All right, you can take a look at the lock bar insert there, as well as the relief cut. The relief cut here is, you know, not a bad size. Sometimes I complain about them being overly thin, and in general I wish it was kind of a thing to make them a little bit thicker. By the way, you can see the name Swish. The camera doesn't know what to focus on here. There you go. Since we're looking right at it, I thought I'd point that out. So you can see Swish and the serial number in there. One thing that I need to talk about in terms of action, so, you know, it's a good action. It's comfortable to actuate. It flips really nicely, deploys in a couple of different ways with no problems. What I really want to talk about, what's really cool about this knife is the detent ramp. So if you look there at the tang of the blade, there's where, you know, the lock bar interfaces. You can kind of see that. But then you see that little cutout right there at the tip of my finger. That cutout, there you go, you get a good look at it there. That cutout is there to allow that detent ball, which you can see right through there. If I flip it over, see if I can show you on this side, you can see the detent ball again there. That detent ball rides in that little groove up onto the blade, which is really, really nice because it means that you don't get that secondary stopping point. Okay, so let's see if I can get to where just so there's where the detent ball would hit the blade. But if I just push a little bit of pressure, the detent ball just ramps up onto that ramp and slides into place really nicely. Now there is one little side effect of that, which is, you know, not amazing, and it's this. Okay, watch. See how the blade kind of wants to bounce back? And so sometimes when I go to shut the knife, if I just drop it and then go to drop it closed, of course it works perfectly that time, but it won't always work perfectly because that little bit of spring tension sometimes wants to push the blade back open. Not anything significant at all. It doesn't bother me, but I just wanted to point that out as sort of a side effect of the detent ramp that we don't normally notice. I will say I love the fact that there's a detent ramp, and in fact, even on this knife, so there's where the detent ball would hit the blade. So you can see the blade is just barely past open, okay? Now, normally on a knife where the detent ball is in that location, you wouldn't need to do a ramp, but it's nice that they did anyway. It's sort of that extra bit of attention. On this knife, really by the time it hits your thumb right here, you're well past where that lock bar would interface with the detent ball and cause you any issues. But it's nice that Olamic went ahead and put that ramp in anyway. It just makes it really smooth and adds that touch of refinement that is very, very appreciated. So that's lock bar and deployment. And of course, the biggest difference and the reason we spent a little extra time there is because of that really cool feature, the detent ramp, which I do very much appreciate. Let's go ahead and talk about the handle. Now this handle, of course, is unique to me, and Eugene and I went back and forth on what I wanted to do with it, and ultimately I landed on this, and I absolutely love the finish that ended up on this. One of the discussions we did have was about the clip, whether we leave the clip raw or just bronze, or exactly what we do with it, a different color altogether. And I did him and haw about it a little bit, and we went back and forth and ultimately decided to just match it with the handle, and that worked out really, really nice. So I do love the way this whole thing has finished. Also, I went with silver hardware because of the silver blade. I always feel like if you've got a satin finished blade, it needs to have satin hardware. Like something needs to tie the whole knife together. I know not everyone feels that way, but I definitely, you know, generally speaking, like to see some connection in terms of color with the blade and whatever's going on back here. And in this case, again, there was some discussion, a lot of discussion, in fact, about the backspacer. Of course, there are tons of options. It could have been blue or purple or green or whatever. But I thought just the plain tie, the satin finish to go with the blade worked out the best. Now, since we're talking about the handle, take a close look there and you can see that is a floating backspacer, which is a super, super nice touch. Really, really adds an element of detail to the knife. And again, you can see in there the swish and the serial number is in there. Lanyard hole is quite pronounced, but it fits with the overall theme of the blade. So if I put the knife down, it kind of, you know, everything flows together nicely. And so in this case, although normally I would be saying, yeah, the lanyard hole is a little overly large on this knife, I think it ties in nicely with the design in general, okay? And so while I'm not a lanyard guy, I don't mind the location or the design of the lanyard hole on this knife. In fact, it kind of, you know, with that extra little cutout around it, almost matches what's going on with the hole in the blade. And so everything kind of flows together really well. Clip, of course, is single position. And again, if we put the knife down and just take a look at it, overall, notice I constantly just feel like I have to put it on that angle, and I love that about this knife. It just has this very, the look is really like what the name implies, just a swish. It looks really, really sharp. It sort of flows is kind of the word that comes to mind when I look at this knife. And the pocket clip does kind of tie in really well and doesn't, I don't know, sometimes a pocket clip can look like an afterthought. It can look like, you know, there's lots of problems with pocket clips in many cases. This knife, from a design standpoint, it's really well done. Now let's talk about function, okay? We've talked about all the little nice features and the choices that I was able to have. And of course, you can make those same kind of choices, and we'll probably make different ones than me. Ergonomics are really, really nice here. So just a very comfortable knife in hand. It just feels absolutely natural. And that's true in lots of different grips, okay? So however you want to hold this. The only grip that maybe doesn't work great is sort of a draw cut grip. But honestly, that's not a grip that I ever use. So other than right then on camera, I've rarely ever done that. So ergonomically, yeah, really, really nice. I do like that they've got a nice full blade thickness up here, so I can, you know, the knife naturally kind of puts you in a saber grip. And so the fact that I've got some place for my thumb to go is really nice. A little bit of jimping somewhere here would have been appreciated, but it's not the end of the world, as the shape of this knife does really lock you in. The texture on the handle is sort of a bead blast texture, and again, it feels very much like a Sebenza in hand, so if you're familiar with that, you'll be familiar with this, and you know that that's a nice grippy texture that really, gives you a lot of confidence. So really, really happy with the ergonomics and the overall look and construction. The one thing I will hit on a little is the pocket clip, not from a design standpoint, but from a function standpoint. So in the shorts I'm wearing today, they're just sort of, I don't know, Gap cotton shorts, I guess. This pocket clip works fine. Okay, but it's fairly thin material. The problem comes if I wear, even a heavy pair of jeans, construction pants, certainly 511s, this is not enough space. So you can see how that's fairly slim in there, and it becomes very, very difficult to get thicker pants into that clip. The spring tension is pretty good, like it's not awful. But it's just not quite enough space. They could have offset this just a teeny bit more to make it a little easier to get into pockets on anything that's just a little bit thicker. So that's really my biggest complaint on this knife. Otherwise, there's really not much to say that's negative. Okay, I really love just about every feature of this knife. With that clip being the only issue, and it's a fairly small issue. I guess the other issue could possibly be price. This is going to be a fairly expensive knife, certainly for most people's, most people's budgets. I think these start at $465. No, maybe less, maybe $425, and then they go up to $465. Anyway, they're expensive. Okay, that's the bottom line. This is not a cheap knife, but for that extra expense, there's some things that you're getting that I do think are worth that extra money, not the least of which is, a fair bit of work being done by hand in the US, by the team at Olamic, which always adds expense, guys. It just does. And with that in mind, let's get to some comparisons. And the first one I'm going to use here is the Kaiser Gemini. And look, guys, this kind of makes the point we're trying to make. Of course, this is a much cheaper knife, and that's because, number one, it's not quite doing some of the things that the Olamic is doing, but two, there's no US hands have touched this. You're not paying any, extra fees for extra work being done or any hand assembling or anything like that, because this is all done in factory and it's all done overseas. Great knife, by the way, absolutely great knife. This one is sold. If you're watching this and you haven't checked out my for sale video, I still have a couple of knives available in that video, so you might want to go back and check out that sale. This one is already sold, but I think this one is already sold. If just go and check the video and you'll see. Anyway, here's a good comparison, a nice high-end knife, very well put together. Not quite in the same ballpark as this, but you may be watching and go, Kevin, this titanium frame lock is too expensive. Have you got anything else? Well, yeah, I do have something else. What else can we show you here? Here is another knife in a similar price point. This is the Riot Epoch, recently reviewed here. And I consider these similar because they're both fairly slim, easy to carry knives. They're not super heavy. You get lots of blade length. They're pretty good cutting tools, very utility oriented, and yet also very high-end, classy, and attractive. And so, yeah, both of these are great in terms of fit and finish, in terms of engineering. They're just beautiful knives. And, I could see someone who's interested in the Swift also being interested in this, no question. By the way, this one is still for sale since we brought that up. Let's see here. Here is a Paramilitary 2. And again, you know what? I would kind of class these in a similar role. They're really nice standard EDC blades, okay? You don't have, I wouldn't call this hard use. I wouldn't call this hard use. I wouldn't call it really gentleman's carry, although it could flex that way. This one, maybe not so much. But of course, the main reason I'm bringing this in is not so much for the role as it is for the fact that everyone is familiar with the Para 2. And so this gives you a good idea of size. And one of the things I've got to say, if I put this cutting edge to cutting edge, look how much extra blade you're getting while really not carrying anything more in pocket. I would even argue that this might be even lighter in pocket. Let's bring in one more sort of USA made knife. Again here, I want to emphasize how slim this is versus how much you get. Here's a big bulky knife, and you're not getting a ton of cutting edge on the hinder. Now, I absolutely love this knife and I wouldn't change a thing about it, but I do want to make that point that look at how much you're getting in terms of carry, and these are a little closer in price. Okay, now I would say these are maybe appealing to different groups of people. I mean, although I own both of them, and probably a lot of you out there would say the same, I do think I did want to bring in a Wharncliffe blade, and I did want to demonstrate just how slim and how much blade you're getting in a fairly comfortable package. All right, so overall, what are my thoughts on this knife? Well, overall, I think, Olamic has really nailed this one. And I've got to say, I think this is Olamic's wheelhouse. The 24/7 was absolutely phenomenal. This, I think, is the same thing. It's just a great design, widely appealing. A little nicer for me, okay? I have more with the 24/7. I felt like I didn't have a lot of, it just didn't naturally fit my hand. It was just a little bit too small for that. And you didn't get quite as much cutting edge. This knife is no larger, I wouldn't say. It doesn't feel larger than the 24/7. It's just that the space is more well used. So I feel much more comfortable gripping this knife. Okay, so I think Olamic has an absolute winner here. I love the design. I love the options that you can do. And I can see this knife being very popular, and it has been already very popular, and it totally makes sense. So there you go, guys. That's my take on the Olamic Tactical Swift, their newest model, and I can't wait to see what they come up with next in terms of another sort of mid-tech offering. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will talk to you soon.